Hey everyone, and welcome back to Chat Like a Native. We are diving into something huge today, something that can really transform your English and make it sound way more natural and fluent. We're talking about sentence stress.
That little extra oomph you put on certain words.
It makes such a big difference.
Yeah.
So we're going to break down what sentence stress is and look at why it matters so much.
And of course, we have tons of practical tips and tricks.
So stick around if you're ready to seriously level up your spoken English.
What's so amazing about sentence stress is it's like the music behind the language.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's all about figuring out which words you want to bring forward, which ones to maybe let fade back a little.
Yeah.
And that's how you create that natural rhythm in English.
It's true. It's something I've always noticed about, native speakers, how they have this effortless, almost musical way of talking. What's the secret ingredient there?
Well, it is sentence stress. It's about recognizing that you don't need to give all the words in a sentence the same amount of weight.
Right.
Like some words, the ones that we really want to emphasize, those are the ones that we give a little extra energy to.
Got it.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example so we can hear how that works?
For sure. Let's take a simple sentence like, I really want to go to the beach. Now, if I said that without emphasizing any of the words, it kind of sounds a bit flat, right?
Yeah.
But if I say, I really want to go to the beach, it becomes much more expressive and conveys my excitement to get to the beach.
It really does. And it seems like those emphasized words, they're like the stars of the sentences, right?
Absolutely.
And all the other words, they're just playing their supporting roles.
Exactly. And those star words, we call them content words.
Okay.
They're nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Basically the words that carry the core meaning of the sentence.
Right, those are the VIPs.
Yes.
But what about all the other words? The ones that we don't really emphasize?
Those are what we call function words, and they're like the behind-the-scenes crew, if you will.
I like it.
Yeah, they're articles, prepositions, pronouns, all those little connecting words. And sure, they're important because they hold the grammar together.
Right.
But they don't carry the same weight as content words when it comes to meaning.
So basically, a good starting point is to stress those content words and let those function words just kind of blend in.
You got it.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get the picture. Can we try another example to really nail this down?
Of course. Let's try this sentence. The old man slowly walked along the quiet street.
Okay, got it. The old man slowly walked along the quiet street.
What pops out to you when you hear that?
I don't know about you, but what jumps out for me are the words old, man, slowly, walked, quiet, and street.
I see it.
Those are our content words. And those are the ones that we naturally want to emphasize. The others, like the and along, they're function words.
Right, they just kind of fade into the background.
Exactly.
Now that you mention it, it's like those stressed words actually add this depth to the sentence.
Yeah, it's like they're creating almost a musical landscape.
Exactly.
But I'm curious, for English learners out there, how can they actually make this happen when they speak?
That's the golden question, isn't it?
It is. What can they do to actually incorporate this into their speaking?
Well, one of the best things, and it might sound super obvious, but it's to just surround yourself with English as much as possible. Listen to podcasts, watch movies.
Immerse yourself.
Exactly. And try to talk to native speakers as often as you can.
Yeah.
The more you hear these natural rhythms of English, the more you'll start to pick them up without even realizing it.
It's like osmosis for your ears.
Yeah.
But I guess just passively listening might not be enough, right?
You're absolutely right. You've got to actually get in there and engage with the language. And a great technique for this is something called shadowing.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about this.
Yeah. Find a short clip of a native speaker talking, maybe a TED Talk or a news segment, and try to speak along with them. Try to copy their rhythm and their intonation as best as you can.
Like a vocal workout.
That's a great way to put it.
But what about when you're not listening to anything? Like, how can we practice this when we're on our own?
Reading aloud is a great way to practice, even if you're just by yourself. Grab a text that seems interesting to you, a news article, maybe a blog post, and before you start reading, go through and underline the words that you think should be stressed.
So you're making a little roadmap for your voice.
Precisely.
I like it.
Yeah, it helps you be aware of which words are the content words and which ones are those function words.
And I bet practicing like this would help with pronunciation too.
100%. It does wonders for your pronunciation because you're literally training your mouth to say those sounds more accurately.
Right.
And speaking of training, don't underestimate how helpful it can be to actually record yourself speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be really eye-opening. Just use your phone or computer to record yourself reading a passage aloud. Then listen back and compare it to how a native speaker would say those same words.
That's a fantastic tip. It's like having a personal coach right there in your pocket.
Mm.
But what if you're practicing alone and you're not even sure if you're stressing the right words?
That's a really good point, and it's totally normal to feel uncertain, especially when you're just starting out. A good rule of thumb is to trust your gut and start by just focusing on those content words. Remember, those are generally going to be the stars of the sentence, and if you're still unsure, don't be shy about asking a teacher or a language partner for some feedback.
Feedback is key.
It is.
So, okay, even if we don't nail it right away, with practice and a bit of guidance, we can get this sentence stress thing down.
Totally.
But I'm wondering, when you're practicing alone and you make a mistake, how do you even know you've messed up if there's no one to tell you?
That's a great question, and it brings us to the importance of being self-aware when you're speaking. You want to develop that inner ear,
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that ability to listen to yourself and be like, maybe that didn't sound quite right.
Like a self-critique?
Exactly. And this is where recording yourself can be really helpful again. When you listen back to those recordings, really pay attention to your stress patterns. Do they sound natural? Do they make sense with what you were trying to say?
Oh, it's about developing a critical ear.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. But what are some common mistakes that people make with sentence stress? I'm sure there are a few classic pitfalls, right?
Oh, definitely. One really common one is like overstressing. Some people, they get so excited about getting this right, they end up stressing almost every single word.
Oh, yeah.
And ironically, it makes them sound less natural.
I can see that happening, yeah. Like they're focusing so much on following the rules that they kind of forget about the natural flow of, how people actually talk.
Exactly. It's important to find that balance, that contrast between stressed and unstressed words. When you stress everything, nothing really stands out, right?
Right. It's like you got to find that sweet spot, that rhythm where those important words pop, but everything else flows together smoothly.
Exactly. And another challenge is just not being sure which words to stress, especially, when you come across longer sentences or when there are words you haven't seen before.
I can imagine that can be a bit intimidating, yeah. What would you say to someone who's feeling a bit lost?
I'd say go back to the basics. Think about those content words we talked about, right? The nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. Start by figuring out what those are. They're usually the ones that carry the most meaning.
Right.
And, don't be afraid to just try things out. See what happens when you stress different words. Like, how does it change the way the sentence sounds? How does it change what it means?
It's like playing with the language, right?
Totally. It is. And
Yeah.
seeing how these subtle changes, these changes in stress, they can create all these different effects.
Yeah, like your DJ, but with words.
Love that. And also, never forget the power of just listening to how native speakers actually talk.
Immersion.
Exactly. The more you do that, the more you'll start to understand these stress patterns naturally.
Just absorb it.
And, speaking of natural, I think it's also worth mentioning that sentence stress is not just like a mechanical thing.
Right.
It's also about how we express our emotions. Like, think about the way you say, I love you. If you stress love, it's a simple statement. But if you stress you, it becomes much more personal and intense, right?
Wow, that's so true. It shows how much emphasis can change things, even with just a few words.
Exactly. It adds a whole other layer of meaning, kind of like adding punctuation to your speech.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about the nuts and bolts of sentence stress, but we should remember that language is all about expressing yourself. It's about having fun.
Absolutely. Should be fun. And, sentence stress, when you use it well, can make your speech way more engaging.
More dynamic.
More expressive.
It's not just about sounding like a robot, right?
Definitely not. It's about letting your personality come through.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
So how can our listeners bring in some of that, that fun, that personality when they're practicing? Any ideas?
Well, first of all, just loosen up. Don't be afraid to experiment. Try using different voices, different accents, maybe even play around with some tongue twisters.
Tongue twisters?
Really? Yeah. I know they can be tricky, but they're a really great way to train your mouth muscles and get better at pronunciation.
I guess they force you to focus on each sound.
Exactly. And when you finally nail a tongue twister, it's like such a confidence boost,
Right.
You'll feel way more comfortable playing with the sounds of English.
So it's like a workout for your tongue.
Exactly. And speaking of workouts, another helpful thing to do is to actually pay attention to your body when you're practicing sentence stress. Notice how your mouth moves, how you're breathing, how your voice goes up and down.
It's a physical thing?
It is. It's almost like a dance between your voice and your body.
That's a cool way to think about it. So it's not just what's happening in your head, it's also about what your body is doing.
Exactly. And one last tip I'd give is to try listening to yourself with fresh ears. Record yourself speaking, and then listen back like you've never heard yourself before. Really pay attention. How's your rhythm? How's your intonation? Are you stressing the right words?
Like taking a step back.
Exactly. Sometimes that fresh perspective can be super helpful to figure out where you can improve.
I love these tips.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about sentence stress itself,
Mm-hmm.
but let's zoom out for a second. How does this actually affect communication, in real life?
That's a great question. And it's important to remember that sentence stress is not just some abstract thing.
Yeah.
It has a real impact on how well people understand what you're trying to say. First of all, it helps to make your meaning clear. It highlights the most important parts of your sentence.
Right.
So it helps people focus their attention. It makes your message stronger. Like, think about the difference between saying, I didn't say you stole the money, and I didn't say you stole the money.
Well, big difference.
Right. Totally changes the meaning. And it's not just about avoiding misunderstandings. Sentence stress also lets us show all kinds of emotions, enthusiasm, doubt, humor, even sarcasm.
It's like a secret weapon for communication.
Totally. It gives you so much more control over how you express yourself.
So are there, cultural things to think about with sentence stress?
Mm-hmm.
Does it change depending on, I don't know, where you're from or who you're talking to?
Another great question, and the answer is yes, definitely. Just like with accents or even the words we use, there can be differences in how people use sentence stress. Like, American English tends to be more up and down than British English,
Right.
more variation in the tone.
So you got to be aware of that.
Exactly. And we also need to think about the situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
We might stress words differently if we're, say, at a job interview compared to if we're just hanging out with friends.
Context is everything.
It is. So it's not just about knowing the rules. It's about understanding how to use them in different situations. But let's not forget that sentence stress can also be super creative, especially when you're telling a story or trying to be funny.
It's true. Think about those amazing storytellers who just, pull you in.
Mm-hmm.
They use their voices to create all this suspense and excitement.
Totally. And sentence stress is a huge part of that.
Yeah. It's like the difference between reading a script and watching a play.
Exactly. And just like with acting, it takes time and practice to really master this, but it's so worth it. Once you start using sentence stress effectively, you'll find that people are more interested in what you have to say. You sound more confident, more persuasive.
It's that extra polish, that special something that makes you really captivating.
I like that.
But what about those times when we just hit a wall? When it feels like we're not making any progress?
Mm-hmm.
How do we push through that and stay motivated?
Well, hitting a plateau, it's totally normal. Everyone goes through it. The important thing is to not let it, get you down.
I know, it's so easy to just give up when you feel like you're not moving forward.
Right. But you got to keep at it. One thing that helps is to, shape things up a bit. If you've been doing the same practice over and over, maybe try something new.
Mix it up.
Yeah, exactly. There are so many resources out there. Try different techniques. Find what clicks for you.
So variety is key, huh?
For sure. And remember, progress isn't always a straight line. Some days you'll feel like you're making huge leaps. Other days you'll feel stuck. It's all part of the process.
Like a dance. It has its own rhythm.
I love that. And this whole learning a language thing, it's a journey, right? It's not about reaching some finish line where you're perfect. It's about growing, expanding what you can do, connecting with people in new ways.
That's beautiful. It's the journey, not the destination. And on that note, to all our listeners who are out there on this journey of mastering English, don't be too hard on yourselves. Celebrate the wins.
Yeah.
And never stop being curious about the language.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Every step you take with sentence stress brings you closer to speaking with more confidence, more clarity, more charisma.
So get out there, practice those tongue twisters, listen to those podcasts, and most importantly, have fun.
Maybe someday we'll even hear you chatting like a native on this very show.
That's it for this episode of Chat Like a Native. Thanks for joining us, everyone.